Working with kids, do you break a teenager, or do you raise a teenager?
Okay.
But as you break a horse, you get on, you buck them out. You try to outlast the horse. Wasn't anything that I ever planned. It wasn't on my life's goals list. If we go back, well, first off, I taught LDS seminary full-time for 18 years. Mm-hmm. And then I taught at ASU at the Institute for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And teachers don't make a lot of money.
So you were involved with youth, though, for quite some time.
Yeah, I've worked with youth for over 40 years. And then, of course, in church, I was always in young men's groups and in charge of working with youth. And my favorite was always that 14 to 18 age group, because we could go out and have high adventure and be up in the mountains and play and do fun things.
Yeah, that's the best calling.
I could tell my wife, I have to buy this new toy because I'm serving the Lord.
Yeah, exactly.
And I need to buy this, and she would give me permission to. So I was a bit of a workaholic. I would teach all day, and because teachers didn't make a lot of money, I always had to have something on the side. Mm-hmm. And when I was in college, I'd sold diamonds out of a briefcase, and I got to where I was selling them to jewelry stores and things like that. When I became a teacher, I slowly changed that business into selling wholesale to public, and we meet people in an office and sell them a diamond. Of course, then they needed a ring or something to put it in, and next thing I knew, I actually had a jewelry store. And before long, I had 5 employees and had a jewelry store going. I also had a couple rental properties. And so I found myself just working all the time. And what time I wasn't working, I'm trying to help my wife raise our 8 children. Of course, we didn't have 8 children the whole time, but it was building and
still 8 children.
Going to ball games and attending concerts and doing all that stuff. And I remember looking at my wife one day and saying, I've got to do something fun. I can't kiss work all the time. I need to unstring the bow a little bit here. And we knew when we got married that someday we wanted to have horses. I had horses when I was a child. She grew up a rancher's daughter.
Where did you grow up?
In Oregon is where I lived when I had horses. My 6th grade through 8th grade years. We lived in Ontario, Oregon, out in the country, out in the middle of the potato fields and the onion fields and the sugar beet fields.
This is the east side of Oregon.
Yeah, right on the Idaho border, right along the Snake River. I was a half mile from the Snake River. And anyway, I always knew I wanted to have horses someday. And so I finally said to my wife, I'm going to go get a horse. I know we can't afford it. Every time we talked about getting a horse, we needed braces for a child or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so I traded a diamond ring out of my store to a lady for this horse. And took the horse home. The horse was wild, hard to catch. And I thought that'd be fun. I'll learn how to train a horse. And I didn't know anything about training horses. As a kid, I just rode, you just got on and rode. Nobody taught you to do anything. You just did it. And so now I had this horse that was a big 2-year-old quarter horse thoroughbred cross, and she was tall and big, and she wouldn't face me. When I stepped into the stall, she just turned her butt to me. She didn't want anything to do with me. And I was getting frustrated. And I'd get to where I could get a halter on her, and I'd get her out in my back area. We'd bought an acre lot and built a custom home, and that was set up for horses. Anyway, I tried to get on her, and she'd start bucking. And over that next 3 months, she broke 5 of my bones, and I decided I needed help.
Just falling off.
I don't like to use the word fall off.
Okay.
I like to use the word that I was bucked off.
You were bucked off.
My wife would go to church, and people would say, what happened to Ron? Because I have a cast on,
Yeah.
Oh, he fell off the horse, and that would upset me because I don't fall off horses.
Yeah, I get it. It's kind of like me. I've got a study group, not a book club.
There you go.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
That's right. Anyway, so I decided I need some help. And at that point, I was teaching at ASU. I had a student in one of my classes. Of course, everybody's asking, what'd you do to your arm? I had a cast on, and I told him I got bucked off. And this gal says, well, let me come out and help you. I'm good with horses. And I said, please come help me because I'm going to get rid of this horse. I can't ride her. And so she came in on a Saturday, and she started talking about natural horsemanship. And I didn't have a clue what she was talking about.
Natural horsemanship.
Natural horsemanship. Mm-hmm. And apparently, in the horse world, We always believed, and you see on TV, that when you break a horse, and that's an interesting word, that you break a horse. And I'll make a connection here in a little while to, raising kids and working with kids. Do you break a teenager, or do you raise a teenager?
Okay.
But as you break a horse, you get on, you buck them out. You try to outlast the horse. And if the horse bucks you off, what do? You get right back on, right? And eventually the horse gives in. The horse finally succumbs to you and submits and says, fine, I can't get you off of me. I'll learn to live with you.
You just have to be more persistent than the horse.
You have to be more persistent than the horse. And the horse is going to try to hurt you if they can to get you off. And if you win, then you break the horse. And then you put a heavy bit in its mouth that applies pressure, and maybe use spurs, maybe a little crop, a little whip. And you're going to get compliance from that horse. And if they don't do what you want, then I'm not saying you whip them, but you whack them with that little crop on the rear end, or you pull on the bit that inflicts pain. If they don't stop, you inflict more pain until they stop. And so the horse learns to submit so that they don't experience pain or punishment. Okay. Well, natural horsemanship is a completely different approach. Natural horsemanship, if done right, a horse will never buck. The theory is to come into the horse's world and to think like a horse thinks. Horses are a herd animal. They're an animal of prey. And we're predators. So we're their natural enemy. Now, most of us see domestic horses in barns and pastures, and they're not afraid of us. But if you were to deal with a wild horse, they want nothing to do with you. They'll do anything they can to escape, to get away from you. And if you trap them in a corner, they'll kick, they'll bite, they'll do whatever because you're the enemy. Well, with natural horsemanship, you want to enter into the herd as part of their social herd. And if you watch a herd of horses, there's a hierarchy, and there's always going to be an alpha horse that is in charge, and it's always going to be a mare. People think the stallion is in charge. Very seldom is a stallion in charge. Occasionally, one might be, but generally it's going to be a mare, an old mare that's in charge. And her job is to take care of the herd. To make
matriarchy.
Yep, that's exactly what it is. And her job is to make sure they have food and water and protection, and she's on duty all day to keep the herd safe. And so each morning as the herd wakes up and starts to move, a younger horse will come up to the alpha mare and maybe try to steal her food. And it's all done with body language and pressure, so they'll kind of move into her space. If somebody gets too close to you to talk to you, how you kind of back away, you can feel they're just a little too close. Well, that's real. And so a horse kind of moves into the other horse's space, and if that horse backs away, then the horse that's left there is the alpha. And so I'm a young horse, and I go up to the mare, and I kind of move into her space to get the food, and she either shows her teeth or puts her ears back or kicks at me. And if I back off, she stays the alpha. If she backs off, I become the alpha. And the truth is, I don't want to be the alpha. I want her to be the alpha. I want to eat and play and enjoy the day and let her take care of the herd. But if she backs away, now I have to take care of the herd. So I actually am looking for her to be the leader. I want to find a leader that I can trust that'll take care of me. But when I wake up in the morning, my life's on the line, and I'm going to test that mare to make sure she's still capable and willing to be in charge. If she's not, I will take charge. Again, just a little interesting side note.
Yeah.
So down at the Boys Ranch, we have parents come visit on the weekends, and we'll do horse rides. And parents sometimes have never been on a horse before, and we'll say to them, now this horse is going to test you, and try to turn around and go back to the barn, as we're going off on the ride. And if you don't take charge and say, no, we're going this way, then she knows she's in charge. And if she's in charge, you're going back to the barn. But if you'll take charge, she'll actually say, oh, good, I'm safe. This person knows what they're doing.
Interesting.
And now she's willing to go on the ride with you and do what you want her to do.
So is the horse in that position, it's not necessarily all about the competition between you and the horse. It's a matter of the horse wanting to know what role it plays.
Exactly. And wanting somebody else to be the leader.
So do they want more for someone else to be the leader?
Yes.
So it's just more of a test.
Yes.
To make sure you're the leader.
Yes.
Than, hey, I want to be the leader and I'm a complete conflict with you.
It's exactly what it is. I want to be safe and know that somebody's taking care of me so that I can eat and play and enjoy the day. I don't want to be worried about bears coming and cougars coming and coyotes coming. I want somebody else to worry about that and take care of me. So they're looking for a leader. Now, what we want to do is we want to inject ourselves into the herd, and we want to become that alpha, that leader. And so in the basics of natural horsemanship, the idea is we're going to enter into their natural world. We're going to learn their language, which is body language, pressure release. I can stand next to a horse and at first I might take my hand and push on their hip and ask them to give to that pressure and step over to the side away from my hand. Eventually, I can just hold my hand next to their hip and not even touch them, and they'll know that I'm asking them to step over. So when I'm riding a horse and I need them to move their back hip to the left or the right, I can get to the point where I just kind of tilt my pelvis and move my leg a little bit, and they'll know that I need them to move their hip over, and that little bit of pressure sends the signal. And because they want to comply, we have a partnership, they'll move that hip. And I kind of skipped a step in there. So the first step is we want to establish ourselves as the alpha. We want that horse to learn that they can trust us and that we'll be in charge. And we do that by controlling their feet, by moving them. So we get into a round pen and we use a little pressure on their rear end to make them start to run in a circle. And then we step in front and use a little pressure towards their head to get them to turn and go the other direction. And by just using our body language, we start to control where they move around in that round pen. We move them back and forth. We get to where we can control their speed, have them walk slow. We can get them to gallop. And the more we control their direction, their speed, and what they're doing, the more they're saying, okay, this person is capable of being in charge of me. And if you do it right, you finally kind of stop putting pressure on them. They'll actually turn and walk to you and come up to you, basically saying, I want to be with you. I want to be close to you. I trust you. You're my safety zone. I'm looking to you for safety.
Interesting.
So this girl introduced me to this concept because there I had this horse that didn't want anything to do with me. So we started doing those exercises, and sure enough, it worked. Within an hour, I had this horse following me around like a little puppy, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
An hour?
An hour, yeah. And 3 months of being beat up and breaking bones, and within an hour, she had that horse following me around. I said, you know what? I've got to learn more about this natural horsemanship. And so I hired a couple ladies that came and taught me more about natural horsemanship and how to train a horse using it. And like I say, you enter into their world. You learn to communicate the way they communicate. And these are all really good parenting tips, by the way, that we now teach to parents. We'll use a horse as the example, but instead of forcing my teenage son to speak my language and to think the way I think, I've got to enter into their herd, into their mindset, into their world, and remember what it was like to be 14 or 15 years old, and communicate on the level that they're on. Otherwise, I'm the enemy.
But you're talking to the boys, though, and so you're saying that the boys need to be. So for the parents and for the boys, it's the same thing.
It's the same. Every relationship you have. If I want to have a relationship with you, and we want, again, with the horse, the first step is I develop myself as the alpha. Okay, so that they look to me as the leader. But there's even a deeper step, and that is forming a partnership where I recognize that horse's ability to be part of the decision-making process. So if I ask a horse to turn to the right, I don't want him just to comply because I'm the boss. I want him to comply because they want to do what I want to do, turn to the right. And if we get to that stage, really all I have to do is turn my head to the right, and when they feel that, they'll go, oh, he's thinking go right. Well, that's what I want to do then if that's what he wants to do.
So the difference there, obviously, is if you were breaking the horse, you're looking for a partnership with a natural horsemanship.
Yes.
As compared to
forcing.
I don't want to do this because I don't want the pain.
Right. Yeah. It's a completely different experience. It takes longer. It takes more patience. And there's a lot more frustration along the way.
Is there more compliance with that eventually?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, obviously, you're going to have a better relationship with a horse if you're doing it the way you're describing it. But is there more compliance by the horse?
You don't even use the word compliance because now we're one.
Okay.
So I'm sitting on the horse, and they're so connected to me, and I'm so connected to them that, we're following a little herd of cows, and a little steer breaks off to the right, and I look at that steer that's breaking off, and as I look, the horse is already moving to that calf to bring it back into the herd. I mean, we work in unison. I don't have to think, okay, we're going to go get that calf. I just have to look over there, and we're doing it. It's just simultaneous. It's like well, people call it horse whispering, and they think that our brains are connected, but it really isn't. It's just them feeling my body, sending signals, and them being used to me and knowing what I want and what we're going to do, and they want to be part of that partnership, and so they're paying attention to me.
So it'd be nice, if I just looked at my son's bedroom.
And he cleaned his room.
And he cleaned his room.
Yeah. Now, that we laugh, but it happens. Mm-hmm. It's not quite like that. What happens instead is he sees his room getting messy, and he says, my mom or dad wouldn't really like this. Mm-hmm. I mean, the thought just goes through his head. He says, I think I'll clean it. You don't even have to ask him to clean his room. He just keeps it clean because he knows that's important to you, and the relationship is important to him, and he wants to clean the room. He wants to clean the room.
So you're talking about a complete change
totally.
In somebody, not just saying that. I mean, because that's a completely different person. It sounds like
it is,
as compared to, well, I'm going to do this because I have to,
when
I'm
I'm
going to change this behavior.
When I first started looking at doing programs, I studied other programs, and most programs out there are what we call behavior modification. That's the same as breaking a horse. We're going to make these boys line up in a straight line. If you step out of line, then you don't get to have dessert tonight. We're going to make you do these chores. If your room isn't clean, your bed isn't made a certain way, then you're going to lose these privileges. And boys learn either to comply with what you ask or the punishment is going to come. And typically boys that are in a program have got to the point when the punishment is dished out, they say, I don't care. That's their self-defense mechanism, is not to care. Take away everything, I don't care. Ground me.
Because then you got nothing.
Yeah. Because then parents have no control over them. And at that point, parents are like, we have no control. What do we do? And they end up shipping their boy off to a program somewhere to get some help. And then those programs oftentimes are what we call behavior modification, and they found a way to structure things in such a way that boy will comply eventually. Otherwise, he's stuck there forever. He eventually doesn't want to be in the program forever. He wants to go home, get back to his friends, so he will comply. But what happens as soon as he's got that heavy foot away from that's hanging over him, once it's gone, what happens? Well, he just reverts back to who he was. And I saw that as I was studying these programs and said, I don't want to develop a program like that. I need internal heart change. So back to the horses, and I'll share a couple of stories. These ladies started teaching me, and it got to the point where I knew more than they did. I was watching videos and reading, and we were starting to repeat the same lessons over and over again. And I very tactfully one day said to them, I'm ready to go to the next level. Is there another level here, And that was really all they had. And one of them said, there's a man. His name is Gary. He was a 67-year-old Motorola executive that had retired. And in the Gilbert area, he lived in Gilbert. He would go around and help people that had trouble with their horses. And he charged like $30 an hour. And I paid $20 for 30 minutes for my kids' piano lessons. That's $40 an hour. And I thought, well, I could do that. So I hired him. And Gary started taking me to a level I didn't know existed. He took me past that, getting the horse to want to comply, to this idea of having a partnership, of having the horse being an equal in the decision-making process with me honoring their ability to choose also. And how when I started honoring that horse's ability, it wasn't just do what I say all the time, but it was me listening to them, which you can listen to them. They can tell you what they need. The partnership got deeper and stronger, and then when we were riding in the hills, it's hard to describe it. You have to experience it. It's like you're one with this horse, and you could be hanging off a cliff, and there's no panic, because you're one and you're working together to get your balance and get back on the side of the hill, or you're crossing a river and you hit a deep spot, and all of a sudden you drop in the water up to your chest, and the horse barely has his nose above the water, but nobody panics. Everybody's calm. And it's a cool feeling when you have that kind of relationship with the horse. And again, there's situations in families with people where you have crisis and things come up, and wouldn't it be neat if everybody's calm and working together to the same goal and thinking the same, and well, so Gary kept delving into my family. He'd never met my wife and kids, but he'd say things like, Ron, I'll bet you drive your wife crazy. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, I'm just watching.
Well, I think most people tell you that.
Yeah, they do. He says, I'm watching what you're doing with this horse. I'm seeing how this horse responds to you. He says, I can just imagine what your wife does. And I'm like, Gary, this horse and my wife are like two different things. I don't know how you make that comparison. And anytime I would have a problem with my horse that wasn't doing what I would ask or would balk at something or struggle, he'd say, well, you know what the problem is, don't you? And I'd say, yeah, it's me, right? And he'd say, yeah, it's you. It's not the horse. The horse knows everything. The horse learned how to do everything when it was a baby. Its mom taught him how to walk backwards and jump and turn and spin and what we call, slide stop or disengage its hip to the left. All that stuff it learned as a baby. The question is, does it know that's what you're asking, and does it want to do it, and does it trust you enough to do hard things? And he kept making this comparison to my kids. And finally one day I kind of called him out and said, I don't see how you're making this connection. And so I'll share this one story that just kind of changed my life. He said, I'm going to show you how this horse affects your wife, how you affect your wife with this horse. But here, you have to promise me you'll do what I'm going to ask you to do before I tell you what it is. Because if I tell you first, you won't do it. And I looked at him like, I don't know. He says, do you trust me or not? And I go, okay, fine, I'll do it. So he asked me about my teaching at ASU, where I parked, and at that time the Institute building was under construction, so we were teaching on classrooms on campus, and so I would park in a parking structure, and I'd walk 20 minutes to get to my first class, and he'd ask me what time I woke up in the morning. I said 4 o'clock. What do you do? I said, well, I get in the shower. What are you thinking about in the shower? I'd say, well, I'm thinking about my class, my first class, and I'm already going through my material and what I'm going to do, and he says, okay, you park your car, you're walking across campus to your class. What are you thinking about? I said, well, I'm in the classroom. I'm already planning my day. And he goes, so what I'm hearing you say, Ron, is that you kind of live in the future. You're always thinking about what's coming next. You're always running ahead. And I said, yeah, I guess. And he says, I've noticed that. He says, because when you're with me, you're always looking at your watch. And I went, really? And he goes, yeah. He says, you look at your watch constantly with me because you have something after we're done, don't you? And I go, yeah, I do. And he says, yeah, you're always living ahead. You're never 100% with me. And you're never 100% with your horse. Horses don't know past and future. They only know the present. That's one of the gifts God gave them. They live in the present. That's all they know. And so if you live in the past, we call that depression usually. And the horse doesn't know what to do with those kinds of feelings when they feel them from you. Because when you start to develop the kind of relationships we're talking about with the horse, they're feeling what you're feeling. And if you live in the future, usually you have anxiety, and a horse doesn't know how to deal with anxiety, and they're picking that up.
I've never thought of that. So he's comparing depression to your past.
Mm-hmm. So think, what is depression? What is depression?
Sure,
dwelling on your past,
and anxiety to the future. That's very interesting.
Yeah, and a horse doesn't know those emotions. A horse only lives in the present, and so if you're a person who lives in one of those other two places, your horse doesn't know how to deal with it. And they're frustrated and they can't trust you. They don't have that. They can't connect with you 100% because something's not right. And you're never going to get that 100% partnership connection. You'll get the compliance stage of natural horsemanship, but you're not going to get to the partner stage. And that's what I was lacking, was that partner stage. So he says, here's what I want you to do. Well, let me tell you, I had a 1-year-old colt that I couldn't get to back off of a railroad tie. My backyard was set up so that when the irrigation water came in, I had an outside edge with 2 railroad ties stacked on top of each other and then dirt where I could keep my horse trailer, and my stalls were up there and the hay was up there so they wouldn't get wet in the irrigation. And so I was trying to teach this colt to back off of the railroad tie, to step off it backwards so that when we were ready to work in a trailer, he would step out of the trailer and wouldn't be afraid to step backwards. They can't see straight behind them. And so to step backwards is stepping into the unknown, and they're scared. But if they trust you and you ask them to step backwards into the dark, they'll do it. If they don't trust you, then they won't do it. And you often hear people trying to get a horse in a trailer, for example, and you see people out there beating the horse, trying to get him in. In fact, this horse that broke my bones, the first couple times I tried to get her in a trailer, she sat down like a dog and would not get in the trailer. And we had whips. We were whacking her and hitting her and pulling on her and pushing on her, and she would not get in the trailer. Well, that's no way to have fun with a horse and have a partnership. What you want is to be able to say, hey, I'd like you to walk into that trailer and point where you want them to go, and have them just walk in willingly, and because they know you would never send them somewhere that would hurt them. They trust you. And that's what you want. Well, so I had this colt, and he wouldn't back off the railroad tie. I said, Gary, I don't get it. He trusts me walking over plastic, walking over water. These are things that are usually scary for a horse. I do all those things, and he does them just fine. But when I have him go backwards off the railroad tie, he won't do it. And Gary looks at me and says, you know why, right? And I said, yeah, me. I get it. But what? And he says, you don't go backwards, Ron. He says, you are always moving forward, and you're always ahead. And the horse can't handle it. And he says, and I don't think your wife can handle it either. And I go, there you go, bringing my wife into this again, you know. And then I started thinking about, in the morning, I would wake up way earlier than my wife, and I'd move around the bedroom getting ready, and I'd try to be quiet, right? I'm in the dark, going to my dresser and grabbing this and grabbing that. And very often I would hear this voice in the dark, slow down, just hold still. And I'm like, what? I'm not doing anything. I'm being quiet. But just my movement in the bedroom was irritating my wife. The energy that I was creating, was making it impossible for her to sleep. And so when he said that, that went through my mind. I thought, okay. So Gary, what is it you want me to do? He said, for the next week, don't touch your horse. You can feed him, and that is, but you can't work with him. When you get out of your truck and you walk across campus, I want you to stop somewhere on campus where there's students. He says, where would that be? And I said, well, there's a little kiosk that serves coffee in the morning, and there's 100 kids there. He goes, I want you to stop at that kiosk. I want you to turn around backwards 5 times. And then I want you to pick something 20 feet away, like a flower bed or a garbage can, and I want you to walk backwards to it. And when you get to it, I want you to go around it backwards 5 times. Then come backwards where you started. Then I want you to unwind and then go to class. And if you'll do that for the next 5 days, so this was Monday afternoon. He says, if you'll do it Tuesday through Friday, and then next Monday morning, when I come Monday afternoon, that horse will back off that railroad tie.
Come on.
That's what I said. I said, no way. And he said, you promised you'd do it. I said, okay, I promised. But I'm going, there is no connection here. There's no way.
So you went out, made a fool of yourself in front of these 100 kids.
I figured out in 30 seconds what he was doing to me. So I get to the kiosk that next morning, Tuesday morning. Well, first off, let me back up. So he leaves, and I go in the house, and I'm thinking, do I really affect my family like that? And my boys are downstairs. It's dinner time, right? And my boys are downstairs playing Xbox. And so I walk down the stairs quietly, but they can hear me coming, and I hear them whispering, Dad's coming. They know my walk. They know what I sound like. I come down, hi, boys, hi, Dad. I sit in a recliner, and I just sit there and start watching them. And they keep looking at me going, what? What do you want? I go, nothing. I'm just watching you. Well, what do you want? Nothing. They were going nuts. They couldn't handle me just sitting there. And I thought, you got to be kidding me. Do I do this to them? Because they're waiting for me to say, is your homework done? Did you get the garbage out? Did you do the dishes? You guys ready for dinner? Did you do your chore? They're waiting for that. And I'm just sitting there trying to watch them play Xbox, and they're going nuts because I'm in the room. And I went, oh my gosh, is that what I do to my kids? And yeah, the answer is yeah, that is what I did to my kids.
So you're spreading your future thinking anxiety to the kids, basically.
Yep. Okay, so then the next morning, I get to the kiosk, and I go, and I'm in a suit, and I have a briefcase, and I'm like, okay, well, here goes. Turn around 5 times, and I did it really slow, and I kept looking at my watch like I was waiting for somebody, I'd kind of take a step and look around like I was looking for somebody and look at my watch and take another. It took me like 20 minutes to do the whole thing, and the whole time I'm thinking, somebody's looking at me, pointing a finger, going, hey, come over here, look at this guy. There's somebody up on the 2nd story of that building over there saying, hey, come look at this guy down here, And it hit me, I'm not thinking about my classroom. I am present on the sidewalk right now. I am in the moment. I'm not anywhere else. I am present. That's what Gary is teaching me. He's trying to teach me how to be present. So I had that figured out just in the first few seconds of doing it. So I went to class, and I practiced that day to be present. Somebody would come in my office, I'd move things on my desk aside, put my watch where I couldn't see it, and I would pay attention to them and not be thinking, hurry and get out of here because I have things to do, right? And I would give them my full attention. And when I went home that night with my wife, I'd give her my full attention. And I just started practicing trying to be present. Well, so the week goes by. It's next Monday, and Gary has changed my life. I have learned what it means to be present, and it's been an incredible week for me, learning how to be present, both at my jewelry store with my employees. And
well, what are the consequences of that? I mean, what's the result of that?
People were calm. People were, at first they were kind of, it's hard to describe it. It's almost like we'd have a conversation. These are people that dealt with me all the time.
Well, your persona's different.
Yeah. The people who talk with me all the time would kind of look at me like, are you okay? And it felt good to them to have a conversation with
Now
me.
you're making me think about my relationship with my wife.
I hope I am. And the big one was with my wife. That's where I noticed the biggest difference. Okay, so that's great. Gary just changed my life. So now it's Monday afternoon, and I cannot wait to see what happens with my horse. This is driving me crazy because I see no connection. So I leave my watch, by the way, in my bedroom because I change my clothes out of my suit, and I get in my cowboy clothes, right? And I'm out there waiting for Gary to come, and I've got my little horse out there waiting for him to get there. And he shows up, and he's smiling at me. And I said, Gary, before we start, I just got to tell you, thank you. You changed my life. I understand what it means to be present, and I've been practicing, and it has made a difference in how I feel and how people feel around me, and thank you. Now, what the heck does it have to do with my horse? And he goes, walk him off the railroad tie. And I'm going, there's just no way, right? So I take the horse over the railroad tie, I give him the same signal I always do, and he steps straight off it and goes right off it.
That's incredible.
And I look at Gary and go, teach me. Teach me. Obviously, I am missing something here. You got to teach me. And that became when I really opened my heart and my mind to him and let him take me to levels with natural horsemanship that I didn't know existed and how to develop a partnership.
So what is Gary's background with all of this? This goes beyond just saying I can help you teach your horse.
He's an old-time cowboy. That was just kind of his passion his whole life. Even though he got a degree in engineering and a master's degree in engineering and went to work for Motorola and traveled the world, he used to set up plants for Motorola all over the world.
So did he use these principles in business also?
Yeah, it's interesting because his wife had a PhD in psychology and counseling, and he worked with her, and she would have particular clients that she felt like working with the horses would help, and so she'd have him come. And so in the evenings, he spent a lot of his evenings back when he was working for Motorola. He spent a lot of evenings working with her clients out in their pasture with the horses.
And this is all part of what they call equine therapy?
Equine therapy, yeah. So his wife brought in the therapy, the clinical aspect of it. Gary brought the understanding of the horses, and they worked together as a team. And then when he retired, he still was continuing to work with her. But in the mornings, he would go around, and in the afternoons, he'd work with people like me, just helping us with our troubled horses and
$30 an hour,
and more with us. Yeah, hey, it was cheapest therapist you'll ever get. Anyway, and then he just started teaching me more stuff, and so now I'm working with boys in the ward and Boy Scouts, and doing high adventure things in the summer, and we had a stake high adventure camp up in the White Mountains. And I had arranged to have 30 horses up there. I had a bunch of men that brought their horses up and were helping us to do this camp. But before the boys could go on this horse ride, we had an awesome horse ride that went down through the Black River, down this canyon, and up the other side. And I didn't like, at scout camp, you get on a horse that's practically dead, and you just go in a straight line and follow the horse in front of you, right? That's not horse riding to me. I wanted these boys to have an experience, And so I had a really neat ride lined up through this canyon, through the river, and crossing the river like 7 times, and up canyon walls. And it was scary. Some parts of it were scary. And so I told the boys, before you can go on this ride, you have to take my little mini course. And so I had boys coming to my house for a month on Saturdays and in the evenings and passing things off with me. Because I didn't want to teach you how to ride a horse out there on the spot. I needed you to have the basics down before we went. But it gave me a chance to experiment with these boys, some of the exercises that we were doing that Gary was teaching me, and to see how it worked with these boys. And I was amazed how consistently these little exercises, just a simple one. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, Greg, it was your son.
Okay.
I forgot about that. It was your son. He had missed the first class on a Wednesday night, and he'd come to second class.
Baseball.
And, it was. I think it was. And so I was trying to catch him up really quick with what they were doing. And he was kind of the, I'm a tough guy. I'm a jock, and, I'm not afraid of horses and all that. And yet most boys who haven't been around horses have a little bit of fear.
Sure.
They just don't want to admit it. And I could see that in his eyes a little bit. And so I had a horse there, and I told him to go up and pet the horse. And, what do you go up, you pet the horse, and then you ask the horse to lower his head. And there's a little exercise you do to get the horse to lower his head. And as he walked up to the horse actually lifted his head up and backed away from him. So he had to kind of trap the horse in the corner And then he started doing a little exercise to get the horse to put his head down, and the horse just kept resisting it and moving his head and wiggling it back and forth and wouldn't cooperate. And he's looking at me going, what's that all about? And he did it for this other little kid who has no athletic ability and no anything. Why isn't he doing it for me? And he was really confident that he was going to be able to do it just like that. And it wasn't going well, which is perfect for me. I'm glad it played out this way. And then I said, Shane, come here. Let's talk for a second. And I said, you walked up there kind of bold and arrogant, and really it was the tough guy syndrome, that I'm not afraid of this horse, I said, and he sensed that from you, and he backed away from you because that was too overwhelming to him. And he's like, who is this guy who's coming to take charge of me, and I don't even know who he is? I says, you need to give the horse a chance to look at you and feel you and invite you into his space. And, well, how do you do that? I said, well, hold your hand out, and then let's just watch him together. And he might come up and sniff your hand, he might not, but watch his ears and watch his eyes, and he'll tell us when you're okay to come in. So, and I said, and then take a big breath and let it out. Let your shoulders kind of slump a little bit. Be humble. And so he did that and held his hand out. And I said, okay, the horse is telling you can come in. And the horse held still. He went in and he petted him. I says, now do the exercise. And then he was able to put his hand above the horse's head and get him to lower the head and do it all. So it was just that simple little lesson of, how do people...
Yeah, what vibe are you sending off immediately when you meet someone?
When you walk into a room, what do people feel? What does your mom feel when you come home from school, or a dad? One of the a therapist that I taught with at ASU, I had a bunch of professors at ASU come watch me one Saturday morning working with some boys, and they were like, "Wow, this is incredible what you're doing here." And what it is the boys have these. I'm going to back up a little bit. Horses don't live in the past or the future. They live in the present. Their feedback is immediate. What they're getting from you, they reflect back immediately. Now, a person doesn't do that. You can come up to me and project feelings of hostility, but I'll try to ignore them and not say anything. And then after you leave, behind your back, I'll say to my friend, oh, he's an idiot, I don't like him, But to your face, I would never say that. A horse will say it to your face. A horse doesn't wait. A horse gives you immediate feedback, and it's always honest. The other thing, it's
pretty refreshing in some ways.
It is. They're also very forgiving. So if you abuse them or mistreat them and lose that trust, they'll let you gain it back in the next 5 minutes. And they'll forget about the fact that you mistreated them 5 minutes ago, as long as now they feel what they need to feel to trust you. And so a boy can experience real life experiences in real time, in a real short amount of time. And they're the same experiences you have with people, only it's condensed down. And so this therapist got a horse. I helped him get a horse, and he was using it with his marriage and family therapy at night. He taught at ASU during the day. At night, he had a practice out of his house. So he had this couple come to his house, and he came to work the next day and couldn't wait to tell me this story. He says this couple's in his office, and the husband's sitting there with his arms folded, and he's just closed. He doesn't want to be there. His body language is, my wife drugged me here for this marriage therapy, and I don't want to be here.
Right, sure.
And so my buddy says to him, obviously you don't want to be here, so let's just cut this thing short right now. It's not going to be good to force it. I'm not going to charge you anything. But before you leave, I'd like you to come out back with me and meet my horse. Actually, I have a couple horses. I'd like you to meet my horses, and then you can decide if you want to come back next week or not. So they stepped out into the backyard, and he brought one of the horses from the stall over towards where the man was and put the horse about 10 feet away. And then he said to the man, go up and pet my horse and introduce yourself to him. Go up and check him out. As the man walked toward the horse just turned and ran to the far corner of the pasture. And the man looks at him like, well, what's that all about? And he goes, you'll see. He says, just hang tight. And he went and got the second horse, brought the second horse over. He said, listen, this time I want you to take some deep breaths. I want you to humble yourself. You're a little bit, you come across arrogant, you come across powerful, and I think that horse was a little overwhelmed by you. He says, what I'd like you to do is breathe slow and calm yourself down and hold your hand out. Same thing as I did with Shane. Hold your hand out and let the horse invite you in. And they did all that, and of course the horse invited him in, and he was able to pet the horse. Then he brought the wife over. And then he said to the man, he says, you see that horse over in the corner of the pasture that ran? He goes, yeah. He says, that's your wife.
Interesting.
Now, if you'd like to come back, I'd be happy to help you guys. And he said goodbye to him, and that was the evening. And then the next morning, he comes to me and goes, man, that was powerful. Just that object lesson was so powerful to let that husband know you're a bully.
Without even saying anything,
without
you're a
saying
bully.
a word.
So I mean, this is going to a point where it's saying your body language, really, I guess it's your attitude.
Yeah.
Right? That you may not even be conscious that you're carrying around with you. I've had feedback. All of us get a little bit of feedback here and there, right? Where I think, am I really like that? I don't think I consciously.
Well, you're springing a million thoughts in my brain as you say all that. While all this is happening with these horses, I'm also a disciple of Arbinger. And Arbinger is a philosophy that came out of BYU. A professor there had developed it. And Arbinger is really a language. He had created a language and diagrams to be able to put together Arbinger, Arbinger. There's actually a company called Arbinger Institute, and they market to large businesses. That's their main goal, is to go into big corporations and teach this philosophy to the employees, the executives, and on down.
I know I've read a book by them.
Yeah, there's Anatomy of Peace is a book that they produced. Leadership and Self-Deception.
That's the one I've read.
Is the business book that most people read. And there's another one that was put out by the actual creator of Arbinger called The Bonds That Make Us Free. The bonds that make us free is kind of a name that really describes it. But this philosophy is the study of what we call self-deception. We go through life seeing ourselves a certain way and thinking we're a certain way, but other people see us a little differently, and they, well, it's not how they feel us, they experience us differently. And we're so convinced that what we see is accurate and right that we don't recognize how we affect them.
Is this, what do they call that, the box?
Yeah, being in the box. Yeah, that's one of the phrases they use. So what I learned with the horses is, as I'm learning these concepts with the horses, all the things I had learned, and I'm a certified Arbinger instructor at this point, I'm going, this is Arbinger for horses. I mean, it's the exact same principles. The first principle of Arbinger that we learn is there's something deeper than behavior, and we call it way of being. So I can go up to my wife and say, honey, you look so pretty today. Here, have some flowers, Now, my wife would look at me and say, what do you want? Okay. She wouldn't say, oh, thank you.
You're probably not the only one.
What do you want? Yeah. Okay. So the behavior was giving her flowers and telling her that she's pretty. My way of being is, why did I do it? And there's two choices. And again, Arbinger created a language. They created a vocabulary. One is I'm responsive. The other is I'm resistant. So every behavior can be done one of two ways, responsive or resistant. Responsive means I see people as people, meaning I see their humanity, their fears, their hopes, their dreams, their fears. I understand who they are. Resistant means I see people as objects. They're there for me to use. They're either in my way, they're an obstacle, they're either a vehicle for me to get what I want, or they're irrelevant, they're just not on my radar. But they're not real. They don't have feelings like I do. So when I give my wife those flowers, and what I'm really thinking in my mind is, I want to go with my buddies tomorrow morning, out into the mountains and go hunting or horse riding or shooting or whatever, and she's got a to-do list that she's already told me for Saturday, So I'm buttering her up tonight and, doing the dishes and doing all these things.
I've never done anything like that before.
Yeah, right. She doesn't respond to the things I'm doing. She responds to what she's feeling, which is, you want something from me. And so typically she slams that door pretty quick, and I go, what, buying flowers wasn't a good thing? Yeah, it was a great thing, but you did it resistantly. You did it seeing her as an object. She was a vehicle. You're trying to get what you wanted. And then when she says no, she becomes an obstacle, and you get mad, Whereas if you were responsive, you give her the flowers and you tell her she's pretty because you love her and you want her to be happy and you want to make her day, and there's no secret motive behind it, okay? We call that way of being. Well, a horse picks up your way of being fast. What are you about? Are you trying to force me to do something? Are you trying to trick me into doing something? Are you trying to make me do something? Or are you trying to come in and be a partner with me? Are you recognizing that I have fears and hopes as a horse?
And that I want security, right?
Yeah, and that I need security. And if that horse feels like I'm taking care of them and I'm there for them, they'll give me everything. They'll do anything for me. Now, I propose that a rebellious teenage boy, if he feels like there's that old movie, Elephant Man. Mm-hmm. And there's a scene in there, you can go to YouTube and see it, because it's just like one of the most famous scenes in movie history, where his mask, he's in a train station, kids are teasing him, and his mask comes off, a bag that he has over his head comes on, and he has this deformed head that looks like an elephant. Mm-hmm. And people start screaming. The children are afraid. They start screaming. And next thing you know, people think that he did something to the children. And now the men are chasing him, because he's a vicious animal. And they get him trapped in this men's bathroom with all these urinals. It's black and white, and it's just a gross scene at this train station. And he's trapped against the wall. And I can't remember the exact line, but he yells out, "I'm not an animal. I'm a man. I'm not an animal. I'm a man." And they're all staring at him. And we all have this need to be recognized. Every one of us, whether you're president of the United States or a homeless person in LA, we just want somebody to know we're real and care about us and recognize us. We just want to be. That's all. Just know that I'm alive and care about me. And some people say they don't, and they'll push you away because they're so afraid they've been rejected so much. But that's what we all want. So a teenage boy who's smoking weed or stealing or not doing curfew or not going to school, you ask him, "What do you want?" "I want you to leave me alone. Get off my back," Mm-hmm. What he really wants is somebody to care about him. That's what he wants. Now, a parent will say, "I love my son." What are you talking about? I love my son. This isn't about love.
So here's a question, though, on that. I've got a couple boys. So you're saying that if there's a problem with your boy, let's say, just use boys here, then if I'm using the analogy of breaking the horse, then I'm going to be looking at discipline, right? I'm looking at discipline. There's a problem here. If I'm looking at the natural horsemanship, then I'm wanting to go into my son's space, right? I want to go into his space.
What do you mean when you say go into his space? It depends what you mean when you say that. That could have a negative connotation.
Okay, well, it's like you're saying with a horse,
right?
I want him to welcome me in.
Yes.
Get to a point where he's welcoming me in.
You want him to welcome you in.
Okay.
You want him to value the relationship with you so much that he would do anything to have that relationship in place.
So one is you've got the stick and the carrot, right?
And the effects are going to be short term, and then it's not going to work in the long run.
Yeah, and then the other one is you're saying, I have recognized you so much and show you love that you can trust me enough that you're actually going to even start taking initiative on a certain behavior, and you're going to change that behavior because
you want to. You want to please me.
Because of what we have together.
So
the bond. The bond between us is more valuable to you than what? Than creating the conflict.
Than anything. Yeah. Than me having fun, being with my friends, getting drunk, getting high, getting my way. All that rebellion stuff is really saying, please recognize me. Do you care about me or not? But
aren't you getting that in the same way back? What about if you're I'm looking at it from a proud standpoint. If I'm acting as a father, I guess I want to feel that way too.
Absolutely.
I want you to respect me, son.
Absolutely.
Right? I want you to recognize me.
Right.
Right? So I'm wanting the same thing.
Right.
Isn't that true?
And that's why we take these boys and we teach them this material and say, this is what your mom wants. This is what your dad wants. And if you want them to be on your side, then let them know you're on their side. Let them know you understand what they feel and what they're experiencing, what their hopes and their dreams and their fears are. And you need to get out of the box with them. Instead of seeing them as an obstacle in your life, see them as people. If you remember when I said to Gary, anytime a horse had a problem, I'd say, well, what's the problem? And he'd always say, well, you know what the problem is. I go, yeah, it's me. Well, that's what we say in Arbinger too. So if my son is rebelling, and he's not coming in at curfew. He just refuses to come in on time, and I've taken away the keys, and I've taken away his phone, and I'm threatening, I'm running out of stuff to take away, right? What do I do next? Well, doing is a behavior, and he's not responding to your behavior. He's not responding to the keys and the car and those things. He's responding to your way of being, and your way of being is resistant because you see him as an object. You see him as an obstacle. he's an obstacle to you getting sleep at night, or being seen as a good parent by the neighbors or people at church, for whatever reason. Now, it has nothing to do with love. You love him. Nobody doubts that. You love him.
But still, those views are selfish.
Yeah. See, I love my wife, but I see her as an object all the time. I use her. She's in my way all the time. And I'm constantly having to check myself and go, am I resistant to her humanity, or am I responsive to her humanity? See, resistant doesn't mean I'm rebelling and fighting against. For example, if my wife's a vehicle, I'm being really nice to her. We're getting along great, right? As long as she's doing what I want her to do, and I'll do what she wants me to do. We use each other as vehicles, and we get along great. But as soon as somebody says no, or somebody's sick, or somebody doesn't, cooperate, then they become an obstacle, and then I'm mad, and I'm upset, and this isn't fair, and that's called being in the box. We now see them as an object. People respond to how you see them, not to what you do, because you can do anything two ways. You can do it responsive or resistant. So if my son is not being compliant, not coming in at night, the answer isn't for me to think of something else to do.
It's not your behavior.
Yeah. The answer is for me to look at me. And see, that's counterintuitive to what we've always been taught our whole life.
Sure.
We think he's the problem, and we blame him, and he needs to get his act together. And Arbinger says, no, you, Dad, you need to look at you and get your act together. How do you see your son? What is he feeling from you? Is he feeling that he can trust you? Can he trust you, or is it about you? Is your motive for him to come in at 11 o'clock because of a genuine, real concern for him? And I have found in my life, when I really stop and look at it, most of the time, it's about me. I want to go to bed. I don't want to be up all night. I need him home at 11 o'clock. Now, I'll tell him, bad things happen at night, and you need to be home, and I don't trust these other kids, and I trust you, but I don't trust them. And, you come up with all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
But the bottom line is I want to go to bed, and I need you home, And
so you got to get up at 4 a.m.
Yeah. And he's over there going, this isn't about me, Dad. You act like it's about me, but you're lying. It isn't. He can feel the difference. He knows, He might even know that I love him. Do you think your dad loves you? Yeah. Well, why do you think he wants you to come at 11 o'clock? I don't know, because he doesn't trust me, Okay. So, Dad, look inside and go, why do I want him in at 11 o'clock? And if your reason is because you care about him and it has something really to do with him, then hold that boundary. And Arbinger teaches us that he'll respond. Now, it might take a little while, just like with the horse. It's a longer training process than breaking a horse. See, we're too impatient. So if I take away the keys or the car, I can get compliance right now. And that's what I want, right? Because it's not about him. It's about me, But if I'm willing to be patient and do natural horsemanship instead and take time and build that relationship. I interviewed a bunch of boys for a podcast that we did the other day. And we talked about the phrase, I don't care, and how when they finally said to their parents, I don't care, how liberating it was for them. They were free, and of course their parents were done. And it landed the boys at a boys ranch because parents didn't know what else to do. We got to have help, And they bring their boy to us thinking, maybe you can discipline him better than we could, Well, I can't discipline him better than you. But what I can do is I can practice Arbinger or natural horsemanship better than you. And I give your son experiences with horses so he can really understand the principles better, faster, as he does it with a horse. And then we transfer it over to people. And I can do those kinds of things. And that's what we end up doing. And parents slowly figure out that's what we're doing. And then they go, wow, this is powerful. Bottom line is I have to look at me and my way of being. How do I see him? And it will take longer. But then he starts to, that's the boys in the podcast. The boys all said, I said, if you give some advice to your parents now, knowing what you know now, having been at the ranch for a while, learn what you've learned, what would you say? And every one of them said, stop taking stuff away, stop grounding us. It doesn't work. You're just making it worse. What you need to do is spend time with us, building a relationship. And unfortunately, it should have been done before.
Do you find that, for example, a lot of the boys that are that end up at Arivaca with you, is it oftentimes that's the relationship they have with their parents?
Oh yeah.
So it's as much the parent in this relationship that is the result of the boy the way he is.
I hate to say it like that.
Yeah, right.
But I tell parents,
but it's part of the picture, right? I mean, like you're saying, can you build a relationship strong enough? Now, I don't know
Yeah.
if everybody fits into that, but
Well, I tell parents, when your son comes home, he'll be in a good place. 50% of his success when he gets home will be based on you being in a good place. If you learn this material, and the whole time the boys at the ranch, we start to rebuild the relationship with the parents. We invite the parents to come that first weekend that they come, and we give them instructions. You don't ask about how school's going. You don't ask about how they're advancing. Those questions are outlawed. But we just want you to be present with him, enjoy him, get to know him, and build that relationship. We want him to feel that you can be trusted, that he can trust you with his life. You know, remember that little horse is going to test you in the morning to see whether or not he can trust you to take care of him. And so parents, that means having boundaries. You have to set curfews. You have to have rules, because that's part of taking care of him. And he'll rebel. He'll push against them. You know, I want you home 11 o'clock. That's not fair. That's not fair. Son, I know it doesn't seem fair to you, but that's the policy at our house. You have to be home at 11 o'clock. I'm not going to talk about taking away keys or grounding him. I'm just telling him this is the rule. You have to be home at 11 o'clock.
there's a big part of that. Why? Maybe explaining why.
If I'm doing it responsively, I don't even necessarily have to explain why. He already knows. Mm-hmm. Listen, these boys aren't stupid. If he feels that I love him and care about him, I got to quit using the word love, because we know you love him. If he feels that my motive is my concern for him and that I want him to be happy and successful, and it's not about me, I'm willing to stay up all night if that's what it takes. That doesn't bother me. I'll stay up all night. I just know this is good for you. You need your sleep. You have school the next day. You know, whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. And I can explain that to him. And he can feel the difference. You can feel the difference when somebody's telling you something, whether it's responsive or resistant. You just know. It's what we sense way of being. A horse just knows it, and you just know it. It just is natural. When somebody says to you, hey, I really like those shoes that you got. You know, those are really nice. You know if they really like the shoes or if they're trying to butter you up. Mm-hmm. You can tell the difference.
Yeah, so politicians are mostly resistant.
There you go. So the boy knows whether or not you really care. And again, he may test it. He will test it. And he'll come in late to see what you do. Now, you may say, well, there has to be consequences or he gets away with it. We get hung up on this having control and people getting away with things, and we got to let that go. We've got to let that go to a certain point. Why is it we have to have control? I haven't been able to figure that out yet, why we're control freaks. Because it's the way we were raised. And people did it to us, and we have to do it to them. But anyway, so yeah, if he does come in late, I would sit down with him and say, hey, son, you know, if I asked you to be home at 11, you weren't home at 11, what do you think we ought to do? You know, and let him come up with something. Mm-hmm. The biggest consequence these boys get for disobedience and rebellion is they don't like themselves. That's the biggest consequence. We can't do anything greater than that. So if my son comes in late, you know, from curfew, and I'm responsive, I sit down, son, what's going on? You know, first off, what happened? He may have a legitimate reason. You know, I was one of those parents that, my son too, you know, is a very intelligent kid, but he just processes things a little slower than I do. And so I would ask him a question, what were you thinking? Yeah, that's right, you weren't thinking. And then I jump all over him, mm-hmm. Okay? Well, he and I had some therapy together after some experiences that we had, and the therapist looked at me and said, would you just shut up for a minute? Mm-hmm. When you ask him a question, wait and let him answer. Mm. Oh my goodness, that made a world of difference. I found out the kid had answers, mm-hmm. and he had explanations, and most of them were legitimate. But I never gave him a chance because mm-hmm. I just jumped right in. You know? Mm-hmm. So, son, what do we do about you coming in late? And just wait and let him come up with it. Let him think about it. He'll come up with a consequence. Okay, let's do that. If he says, well, I should give you the car key. Okay, then give me the car key. And then let's move forward. And if he knows I care about him, it's going to make a big difference. Let me share another story that was very impactful for mm-hmm. me. You know, I know this material, but it doesn't mean I always live it. You know, mm-hmm. I'm still a person who messes up. My youngest son was raised on the Boys Ranch. Mm-hmm. He moved there when he was 13 years old, and he spent the first year just with me down there. And he was one of the boys on the ranch. We kind of used him. When we first got started, we didn't have a lot of boys, and we have rules that you can't ever be alone with a boy. There have to be, you know, it's too deep leadership type mm-hmm. stuff. And so we would use him as a pawn and use him to be that second person when we needed mm-hmm. him at places. He never knew that's what we were doing. Mm-hmm. I guess we were using him as an object. But anyway, and then as well, there was a parent weekend. His mom came down, and he was showing off to his mom, and he and I were horse racing, and he ran into a fence and broke his leg and ended up going back up to Gilbert for 6 weeks. And when he came back down, I'd had like 8 boys come into the ranch, and he didn't know them. And all of a sudden things had changed, and he wasn't quite as familiar with everybody as he was before. And so at that point, his relationship with the boys was a little different. And
he was more of an outsider.
Yeah, he was now kind of an outsider, and living at the ranch wasn't so cool anymore. So for the next few years, now my wife ended up moving down, but for the next few years, he didn't really like his life. And there was one boy that he got close to, and there was a boy that I was close to also. And this boy was getting ready to go home, was doing fairly well. He had a home visit. The home visit had a bad experience, and his dad said one of the cardinal phrases you never say. He said, "You haven't changed at all." You don't say it to a kid who's been working so hard, to change. And he slips up one little thing, and you go, "You haven't changed at all." And he couldn't get that out of his head. He came back to the ranch very upset and depressed. And before we really had a chance to process it, he hung himself. And we had a suicide there on the ranch.
Wow.
And that was the hardest day I ever experienced on the ranch. And to this day, I'm very close to the family. We've been in contact. And on the anniversary of his death, they come visit, and we spent time together. But I was so busy that day protecting the boys and taking care of them and getting help and having people come in to help and keeping them away from the crime scene because the police were down there with tape all over the place. But I forgot about my son. And he actually went down and saw the body. And it was kind of gruesome. And, much later we learned it ended up being one of those PTSD type experiences. Well, and I was scheduled to go on a final ride with some boys with their horse. They were graduating. We were taking their horse to the mountains for that last testing period with their horse to see how well their horse trusts them and stuff. And kind of a neat experience to end their journey at the ranch. And I was always the one that went on the final rides, and the boys liked me to go, and I liked to go, and it was a big deal. And I had got the therapist to approve me taking my son with us on the final ride because I didn't want to leave him alone. Because we just had learned that he's addicted to painkillers, and I just needed to be with him and watch him and keep an eye on him until we could figure out what we were going to do and try to get him into this program. And so I said, "Trevin, I want you to go on this ride with us." And he goes, "I don't want to go. I'm not going." And I said, "Well, I really need you to come and go so that I can keep an eye on you." He said, "I'm not going. I'm not going." Well, the morning of the ride came, and he got up, and I was at home. And he goes, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm not going." "What do you mean you're not going?" I said, "I'm staying here with you." And that was the first thing that just shocked him. And in his mind, he's going, "Why are you staying here with me?" And he didn't trust me. What's your motive? Are you trying to trick me? Are you going to tie me up and take me to this program? What's going on? He was 18 years old at this point, by the way. And anyway, I just said, "No, I need to be here with you." And so he was shocked that I gave up a final ride to spend with him. So that was the first indication maybe my dad really does care about me. But he still wasn't sure, so he still tested me a little bit more. And so now we're going to this program, and we're doing group therapy together with other parents and boys. And there were several times we had classes together, and then we separate, and I would be with parents, and he would be with boys, and then I would leave. He'd be there a lot more than I was there. But I was there 4 days a week and participating with them. And anyway, at one point I was asking myself, because his attitude stunk. He didn't want to change. And so I'm going, okay, what do I need to do? Now, do is a behavior. And as soon as I said that to myself, I went, "Ron, he's not responding to what you do. He's going to respond to your way of being. So how do you see him?" "Well, I see him as immature. I see him as rebellious. He really hurt his mom. He took enough of his mom's medicine that she went through some real pain and withdrawals. And he did that to his mom, and that upset me. And I guess I'm kind of mad at him. And I realized that I was resistant with him, that he was an obstacle to me. And also, how does it look? Here's a guy who runs a program for boys that are struggling, and his own son is a mess,
Yeah, how could he do that to you?
Yeah. And I'm going, man, I can't help him until I see him differently. And so I spent a couple of weeks on my knees reading scriptures, I'm going to get emotional on you here, trying to see him the way the Lord saw him. I knew he was God's son, but what does that really mean, And the fact that the Savior would atone for him and loved him that much. And what am I willing to do?
Mm-hmm.
And why? The Savior did it for no other reason than just love. There's nothing tied to it. And if I have that faith and I hang in there and then I see the results, then I become more convinced, wow, this is the way to do things. It's actually the gospel in action. It really is.